Hello and welcome. Today's video is all about the mini split that I installed on our Lance 2185 travel trailer so that we can heat and cool with electricity in our trailer. And as part of this, I removed the rooftop air conditioner so that it would free up roof space on the trailer for the solar panels. And I'll put a link to the video here that is all about the solar panels installation and how I did that. And if you're curious about the overarching project of converting our trailer to run completely off of electricity, I'll put another card here that is the overview video where I show all of the modifications that I made to the trailer. So this video today is the third in the series of the details of the different components that I've replaced or upgraded or changed in the trailer. And then I will continue. I have a few more videos I'll be making as well. And then I'm going to be getting into making videos about the trip that we went on that was nearly 2,000 miles of driving down into Arizona and back to Utah in this trailer as you see it modified in this manner. So let's get started. Our trailer came with the standard rooftop air conditioner that most travel trailers come with. And I knew when we purchased the trailer that I was going to be removing the rooftop air conditioner probably because I already done my research prior to even buying the trailer. But I thought I would go ahead and check anyway, just out of curiosity to see how inefficient they really are. And so I installed my electric meter on the shore power cord and started up the air conditioning. And this is the results. So you can see here that the air conditioning was near it to max. It was around 1200 watts. And then I even saw it peak as high as 1300 watts. In any case, that's my test that I did, and then I took it off. And this is the hole in the roof of the RV, and then I installed a fantastic fan vent in its place because it's the same 14-inch square hole that it fills, and I needed to fill the hole with something and might as well add a fan and get additional functionality and ventilation if needed. And also the wiring was even already there for it, so it was pretty simple to install that fan. So after doing that, I was trying to figure out where I was going to be installing the indoor portion of the mini split. Now, to be clear, the outdoor portion of the mini split was going to be on the tongue of the trailer, and I knew that before I even purchased the trailer. On the inside, though, it was not clear, and I thought initially I would maybe try to figure out how to install it hanging from the ceiling and be right there in front of this black shelf that you can see in this picture. It's more of like an accessories shelf, and I'd have to be just mounted in front of it or maybe remove the shelf. But the problem is the front cap of the trailer is rounded, so there's not a really good surface to attach to, and I'd have to be off the ceiling, and then maybe that's not great. Anyway, I decided to maybe look for a floor unit. So I did quite a bit of research looking at mini split units out there on the market, trying to find one that has the floor wall unit. And frankly, just couldn't find one that fit what I needed for various reasons. I don't remember all of them right now, but you can see I measured that area and just wasn't able to find one that would make sense there. And so I then kind of looked over on the walls of the area, and here in front or above the main door, it wouldn't make sense because people are coming in and out right there and they would hit their head on it. And so then I looked across the way and there was a curtain there that would be have to be removed. And then also just there isn't a flat wall there, so I was kind of dismissed it at first. And then I just thought about it more and I thought, well, you know, maybe I can build some mechanism or some mounting brackets that are lifting the mini split off of the wall. And so I looked into that, and I did end up finding a way to do that. So I went ahead and purchased the mini split, and this is a SEER 33.1 mini split, which if you're not familiar with that, that's SEER is an efficiency rating, and 33.1 is extremely high in my experience anyway. In any case, this mini split requires 240 volts. And I got it because I knew that I wanted to do 240 volts so that I could do the EV charging off of the trailer and also be able to split the load across two inverters. But my trailer was technically a 30 amp trailer, which is only 120 volts. So I knew I was expanding beyond its normal parameters of electricity. I wanted to be able to get this mini split because it's so efficient, and I knew that power would be at a premium. I did a test fit on the tongue of the trailer to see how well it would fit and whether or not the propane tanks would fit coming in and out, and that's something I just really wasn't sure about. And I'm happy to report that they do, but it is really close, and you have to like rotate them so the handle doesn't quite hit the mini split, and it can come in and out. But I don't intend to use propane at all, and so I've actually since taken them off, and I just leave them off of the trailer. Sometimes I take it in the bed of the truck if it's winter and I think I might need it, and so far I haven't actually needed it, but it's possible I will in the future. So after I'd done that test fit of the mini split, I knew what I would need to do to get it on the outside fairly well, but I still needed to figure out how to actually mount it there. And so after measuring and then going to the store and looking at various options, I found this aluminum angle iron that was heavy duty enough to fit the bill. And so I purchased that and put it here on the tongue of the trailer and measured it out and got it all perfectly centered, and then cut them to length. And then I had to figure out exactly where the holes needed to be drilled to match up with the feet on the mini split. And then also with these giant U-bolts that I got that are actually meant to hold leaf springs on like a trailer or something. And keep in mind, all of the parts that I'm talking about in this video are all linked in the description down below. So if you're curious about that, go into the description of this video, click on that link. It'll take you to a Google sheet, worksheet or spreadsheet, and then you'll be able to see all the different categories of parts of this whole RV build in there. After getting all of the bolts, holes drilled and the bolts inserted, and the girls of course wanted to help with that and they were great, I then mounted the mini split on these rubber mounts that are for this purpose, for a mini split to not cause vibration sounds to go into a living space. And so that was important in this case, and I mounted them on that, and luckily with the back mounts it was able to align perfectly so that the U-bolt goes straight up through the aluminum angle iron and right up into the foot of the rubber mount. Now also in this case, the aluminum is on a steel trailer, and the steel is painted, but I went ahead and put some rubber between the aluminum and the steel just to isolate them from galvanic corrosion and maybe just isolate a little bit more vibration. So then the U-bolts were too long and I cut off the excess bolt, and then also the rubber mounts, the holes were too small, so I had to drill those out just a little bit bigger to have these big U-bolts going through. And after doing that, I got the outdoor mini split mounted successfully on the tongue of the trailer, and it's traveled now for 2,000 miles out there with no problems whatsoever. So then I started to tackle the inside unit of the mini split. Now these are meant for residential homes, so they're quite large, but I still had measured the space in the trailer and I knew it could fit in theory. So I brought my wife and sister out to the trailer and had them hold it up so that I could step back and look at it from a distance to get a feel for how well it fits. And it was fairly tight between not wanting to get hit by the slide out when it comes out in and out on the left side, and then on the right side there's a closet right there, and I wanted the closet door to be able to open as much as possible anyway. And it does successfully do that, but it does restrict that door opening somewhat. So then I set to work. I removed the surround around the window and looked for studs in the wall, which I had done prior to even buying the mini split. I'd figured this part out. I found that this particular stud finder could kind of see the studs, which are aluminum studs in the wall, but it's finicky, and this is the best indication I could get right here, this picture you're seeing, but it was not real clear. So I purchased a infrared camera, and with an infrared camera I was able to run the heater really hot in the trailer, and by this point of the project it was winter, so I could go outside and see the heat coming through the walls through that aluminum, because the aluminum transfers the heat way better than the foam core walls do. And so by using this technique I was able to for sure conclusively isolate exactly where the wall studs were, and then I marked them with pencil so that I could see it when I'm installing the brackets. And then I did the same on the other side as well, but the other side is where the slide out is, and the slide out actually is bolted to and taking advantage of those wall studs, as you'd probably expect. So these two bolts right here you can see in the picture are actually utilizing that same aluminum framing. So I was able to kind of mark off of those as well and verify where it was. So these are the actual brackets that I purchased on Amazon, surprisingly, and they stand off 5 1/4 inches out from the wall. But I didn't want that particular look, so I painted them black so they look much nicer, and then set to work drilling holes in the wall, which is of course a little nerve-wracking doing so, but you know, it's necessary to get this actually done. And it turns out really nicely. They are perfect Z brackets is what they're called for this purpose, and they stand off just as far out as that wooden pillar is that has the magazine racks in it. And then I cut a piece of wood and was able to get it painted black so that it looks nice as well, and then bolt it to those Z brackets. After I got the board on there just with 2 bolts though, I then hung up the mini split just to make sure it all fit and works. And then I took it back off and drilled out all the rest of the holes, and I created a little stencil here so I could kind of line up the holes appropriately and get them drilled in. So then after getting the holes drilled and vacuuming up all of the sawdust that was on the floor, I put all the bolts through and got the board fully mounted. After doing that, I then kind of checked on the tolerances of how everything fits. Then I mounted the metal backing that is what the mini split hangs off of. It's been a lot of work, but I finally have gotten to the point where the mini split can be hung on the wall. So as you can see here, there's the mounting plate that came with the mini split, and then this black board is what I cut and installed, and it is mounted to the wall of the RV. So over here we have this Z bracket that I got off Amazon. I'll put the link in the description down below. These two screws here are stainless steel screws, and they are going directly into the aluminum stud that's in the wall that is part of the frame of the slide out. And same with this bracket up here, and then there's a bolt right here that is going into that Z bracket. So this is firmly bolted to that Z bracket, which is firmly bolted or screwed into the stud in the wall. And same up here. And then over here we have, you can't see it, I guess I'll point down here. So the same Z brackets are also back here on this side of this wooden trim piece. I don't know what to call it. So anyway, there are 4 brackets right here. So this side is very sturdily mounted, and then there are no more Z brackets until we get all the way to the end here. And these two are firmly mounted as well into the aluminum stud that's in the wall right behind here. So these 2 screws and these 2 screws here are firmly screwed into that aluminum stud. So that means this side of the board is very firmly mounted as well. So it's quite strong. I can yank and pull on it and it does not budge. It's really sturdy. Then we have this metal mounting plate. By the way, this is the bolt that is for the Z bracket on that side, and then this bolt is the same for the other side. And because they would have caused this mounting plate to be crooked, I went ahead and just used a stepper bit and just drilled a hole there pretty big just so that it would not be in the way. Okay, so then mounting wise, I have 2 screws here that are pretty short that just barely get through the piece of wood. And this wood is, here I'll come from the bottom, I think it's 1/2 inch plywood. And then you can see here the gap behind is pretty narrow. It's about 1/4 inch. So I didn't want any screws going through into this wood, so I used these pretty short screws that I've been using throughout the trailer in various places where I don't want to go too far. So we have 2 there and 2 there, and then right here is a bolt. So on this side it kind of looks like a Phillips screw, but if we go around on the other side, hopefully you can see that there is a nut on the other side. So this is a firm mounting point that is not a screw that can get pulled out of wood. This would have to pull out a whole chunk of the board. Same here, the exact same bolt and nut, and there's a big fatty washer on the back side as well. And then this is the same bolt and the same bolt. So basically we have 4 bolts in this thing, and then 4 screws over here to help hold it in where this is a shallow space behind, and I couldn't use a bolt because there's no way to access the backside to get the nuts screwed in. Now let's talk here as well about these bolts. You can see this is the nut. These are 3/4 inch bolts, and normally you might have the finished surface with the bolt head and then the nut on the backside, but because of the narrow clearance, I actually had to, before I made these screws tight, while the Z bracket could still be moved around, I had to get the bolt in the behind it so that it could come through the hole. And then I was able to put the nut here on the face, and then I could interact with the nut. And luckily there's enough resistance on the backside that I didn't need to try to get something back there to hold it, because I don't know if I could. It's pretty narrow. Otherwise it might be some screwdriver just trying to hold it, give it just a little bit more resistance so it doesn't slide. But I didn't actually need to do that. So that's how all of these are mounted, where the nut is on my side so that I can get to it. So like I said, 3/4 inch bolts, and then you can see I tightened enough so the wood squished and the bolt and the nut are exactly flush right there. This will be visible, so I kind of wanted to try to look as good as I can. And then these right here, I think these are 1 inch bolts because they come out the other side just a little bit more. And so then at that point, I was able to then mount the mini split in its official spot, and it works fantastic there. So then after that, I got the wiring hooked up to the indoor unit, and then I had to drill a hole through the floor so that the line set and electrical communication wires will go down through the floor and out to the unit on the tongue of the trailer. And this was the third hole of this size that I have drilled in this trailer. So I was a little bit used to it at this point, but it's still a little nerve-wracking, and this is the most obvious hole that I drilled that's in finished space. But I had to do it to make this work, so I drilled that hole, and then I ran the wires out to the outdoor mini split and got those hooked up. And then I ran a wire from that outdoor mini split and across into the trailer, into the hole that is underneath the couch. In my past video when I showed the core of the system and the batteries and the inverters, that's the hole that it came up through and connected into the AC distribution panel under the couch. After doing that, I then got the line set, which is the copper tubing that has the refrigerant running through them, and I pushed those down through the hole in the floor and ran it over the stabilizer jacks and then under the frame and up to the tongue of the trailer. And then I had a kind neighbor who has HVAC experience and tools come over and help me just to vacuum out the line set and release the refrigerant so that obviously the mini split will work. And so that was a very helpful specialized task, and I potentially would have hired it out if I had to, but I didn't end up needing to do that. And we checked it for leaks, made sure everything worked great, and it did. Fantastic. Then Jessica at that point sewed some covers for the line set because it just looks a little bit nicer and helps to keep them contained. And I had to poke out a hose at this point that is where the water will drip out from the air conditioner when it's condensing moisture out of the air. And we may end up actually collecting moisture from it in the future if there's a lot of moisture, and we potentially want to run that through our Berkey water filter if water is scarce, for instance. And then here I used some zip ties to hold the line set to the frame of the trailer to help keep any stress off of the attachment points on the mini split. And then we turned it on for the first time and it fired right up, and Lydia loved the heat. We're doing our first test of the mini split, and it was 25 degrees in here when we came in here, and now it's 29, and the girls are loving the warmth coming out of it. What do you think, girls?
I love
Much better than a really cold trailer, huh? Yeah. All right, let's look at the energy stats. So it is currently pulling about 1400 watts. There was almost no wattage being pulled prior to turning on the mini split. And but right now it's having to warm up the trailer. This is how loud the outdoor unit is. I don't know how well you can hear it, but it is remarkably quiet. Here's the, you might hear the wind in the microphone here. Here's the back side of it. So it's sucking here in the back and blowing out the front. This is how loud the outdoor unit is when it is on, I think, full speed. You can hear that sound of the fan. Standing back here just 3 feet away from it, it's really pretty quiet, and inside you can only hear this slightest little hum. I do have these rubber mounts, so that's helping to not transmit the humming into the trailer. It just started its cycle where it melts off the snow off the back. I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a little bit of steam showing. And it was pulling about 600 watts, and yet it wasn't blowing anything inside, and that's because it had reversed the refrigerant direction. And you can see it's all clear back here, but I never really saw a lot before anyway. It hasn't been running that long, but you can see right there, there's that water dripping, so it's getting all the ice out of the coils. Looks like it's done. And then what I did is I mounted the remote control here just on the side of it, so it's out of the way, but where we can find it easily, and it doesn't fall off at all. Now, one of the things to be aware of with this whole installation is the turning radius of the truck. Because the mini split is where it is, it actually does restrict the turning radius just a little bit. And so I went into a parking lot and I turned really sharply, slowly, and got out and checked periodically until I got all the way up to the bumper, so that I could then kind of get a feel for how sharp I could turn. And it turns out this is just the steering wheel just like an inch or two backed off from its steepest turning angle, and it's able to achieve just barely this. So when I'm turning, if I hit the maximum turning radius, I just pull back a few inches and I know that it won't actually hit the mini split. And that hasn't been a problem yet in our camping, but it's something to be aware of. If you turn really sharply, the mini split will potentially be in the way and might hit the bumper. After we got this mini split installed, just a few days later, it was now early January, and there was a really cold night in the forecast where it was going to be getting down to around 6 degrees Fahrenheit. So we camped out in the trailer out there next to the house, and we watched a movie and then turned the mini split down to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was able to keep the trailer relatively warm all night. Definitely better than camping out on the ground. Now, I kept it that cool because potentially I wanted to see what the real world performance would be of the battery bank holding up, because we were not plugged into the house for this test. And it did consume the vast majority of the battery bank, which is 9.6 kilowatt hours, or 8 12-volt Battleborn batteries. I'll be getting into this in more details in future videos that I'm going to be doing about the performance of this trailer. But yeah, it survived the whole night. The battery bank was able to provide the heating for the whole night, and the girls got up and were warm in the morning. And you can see here, by the time we left the trailer, it was down to 10% on the battery bank. I hope this has been informative for you to see how this build has gone, at least in this mini split specifically. If you're interested in the solar panels or the core components like the batteries and the inverters, or just an overview walkthrough video of all of the modifications that I've made to this trailer, I will put a playlist card just above right here so that you can see that. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments down below. And then, like I said, in the future, I'm going to be posting videos as we're using this trailer and going on trips. And we have actually already gone on a trip to Arizona for 2 weeks and drove 2,000 miles using this whole trailer. And we even got in to using the air conditioning a little bit down there in Arizona in February. So I'll be posting videos about all of that in the future. So if you're interested, subscribe to my channel and you'll get notified automatically when I post those videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
What you doing?
Oh, I'm still working on installing this mini split.
Oh. See you in the next video.